Hey there, folks. Welcome back to another Counter Slam model review. I'm Jeremy, and I'm going to be talking to you guys today about the Woldwrath, the magic monkey, as it were. He's a really cool model, and I think that sometimes he doesn't get some of the love that he really does deserve. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. I guess our typical way of doing this is we're going to talk about the stats, so let's go ahead and do that. So first off, he's got the typical construct speed. He's a speed 5. As I said, that's pretty normal for our construct. Circle's never too slow, never too fast. But it is important to note that speed 5 on a Gargantuan actually surprises a lot of people. Most people look at him and assume, well, he's a Gargantuan, he's made of stone, he's probably going to be pretty slow. Maybe speed 4. Like the Mountain King or the Scorn one. I always forget that thing's name. You know, or a lot of the others, like the Kador one, the Conquest, the Mammoth. That's the Scorn one. Anyway, but he is a speed 5, which makes him slightly faster than most of them are, or at least some of them are, and faster than a lot of people will expect him to be. He's got a strength of 16, pretty standard for a Gargantuan to have really huge strength like that. He is a mat of 6, again, not too atypical. They tend to not like to make these Gargantuans and Colossals overly accurate. Although, one always does wonder why they decided to go the opposite direction and make the Mountain King mat 5, but that's neither here nor there. Then he's rat 5. This is, again, pretty typical. Almost every heavy in the game with a gun is going to be rat 5, as are most of the Colossals and Gargantuans. I know a lot of people complain about Rat 5 on Warjacks, but it's just because they can boost. That's the whole reason. Warjacks and Warbeasts with guns are typically Rat 5 or even Rat 4 because they can boost. He's a defense 7. Well, duh. He's a giant stone monkey. He's probably not really dodging around too much. He's probably, I think this is one of the lowest defenses on any of the Gargantuans. Most of them hover around 8, 9, 10. And he is an armor 20, which makes him I think the highest, or I think he's tied for the highest, or possibly the second highest armor among any of the Colossals or Gargantuans. So that's a pretty good place for him to start. Obviously, he is a construct, and he has 3 attacks. His first one is a gun. It is called Lightning Strike, and this is a wonderful example of Circle having an ability that is an ability or a spell or a weapon or something like that named after another ability in the game. So Lightning Strike is also the name of the Warpwolf Stalker's Animus, which every player should know because every Circle player should know because almost every Circle player plays lots and lots of Warpwolf Stalkers. The Lightning Strike Animus, of course, is the Animus that gives Sprint. So anyway, this gun, the Lightning Strike, it is a range 14 gun. It is only rated fire 1, and it doesn't have an AoE, but it sort of does. So we'll get into that here in a second. It is a power 15, and it is a lightning elemental attack. So obviously lightning elemental because it's a lightning strike, so certain things will be immune to it. But power 15, that's really good. That's one of only 2 guns that Circle has that's actually power 15. The other one being, of course, on the Celestial Fulcrum, its Flame Blast ability, or range attack, rather. And this is just really good for Circle. It's a good ability because it's a boostable gun, and Circle has a real shortage of boostable guns with any decent kind of pow. So let's get into that sorta, kinda, not really AoE that I was talking about. So it has an ability called Storm Generator. I believe this may actually be an ability that Signar has on something of theirs that I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, moving on. The Storm Generator ability says that when the model directly hits an enemy with its ranged attack, so when the Lightning Strike directly hits something, I center a 3-inch ring on the model that I hit. Then I bounce a POW 10 electrical damage attack to the nearest model within 4 inches, ignoring the Gargantuan. And then that model, of course, takes a POW 10, and I center another 3-inch ring around that model. Now, the 3-inch rings, unfortunately, don't do damage when they come into play, as awesome as that would be. But what they do instead is that any enemy models, I believe it's enemy models, let me double check that really quick. I know nobody likes to have the dead air of that. Let's see here. Nope, it's just models. Just models. All right. Anyway, so any models that enter or end their activation in those 3-inch AoEs that this attack drops down take a POW 10 electrical damage roll. So it's kind of a zone control ability, which is something that Circle has a fair bit of, and it's never bad to have more of it. If you use it right, you can potentially land it on, say, 2 models at the front of a unit. You can drop the attack on one, put the AoE on him, bolt over to the other guy, put the AoE on him, and then you end up with 2 rings at the front of a unit that basically make it really hard for that unit to safely move through. So it's pretty good. All right, so now we move on to this guy's real purpose in life. Although I feel like a lot of Circles would disagree with me because they tend to take him mostly for the gun. Anyway, his fist attacks. His fist attacks are pretty good. So he's got 2 of them, obviously, 1 for each fist, left and right. Strangely, unlike every other construct warbeast that Circle has, the Woldwrath's fists are not magical, and I always consider this to be such a weird thing to do with him, and sometimes it leaves him vulnerable to things that other constructs just aren't vulnerable to. Namely, of course, incorporeal models that try to run by them. But anyway, I digress. The fists are, they are power and strength 19, so of course he's strength 16, so these fists are each power 3. Brings him up to the power and strength 16, or 19 rather. The fists don't really have, they have the standard Gargantuan reach, and they also have a really cool ability on them called Earth Shaker. I don't know if anything else has this ability. I think this is that Earth Shaker on the Woldwrath is the first time I ever heard of it. Anyway, what it does is this: whenever the Woldwrath hits an enemy model directly with his, or of course directly, whenever the Woldwrath hits an enemy model with one of his fists, he centers a 4-inch ring or 4-inch AoE on the enemy model, and all models under the AoE are knocked down. This is really good, and you can do it twice. So auto knockdown fists are always sweet. Auto knockdown in an area fists are freaking amazing. And it's part of what makes the Woldwrath super awesome. So that's all of his attacks. If we flip over the card, he's only got a couple rules left that we haven't seen. So the first is just he has Spell Ward. Spell Ward is kind of a double-edged sword here. Obviously, there's lots of drawbacks from Spell Ward. You can't cast your own spells on it, which means that in Circle, we're not able to cast things like one of our armor buffs, Inviolable Resolve, or Restoration, or Strength of Earth. Or, sorry, Stone Strength, or Roots of the Earth. I tried to combine those spells there. So we can't get him up to that nice armor 22 or 23 with Roots of the Earth. He already has all the other effects of Roots of the Earth, not being able to be knocked down, pushed, moved, whatever, because he's a Gargantuan. And of course, no stone strength, or no stone skin rather, means that we can't buff his strength any further to make him a POW and strength 21, which would be pretty damn sweet, but unfortunately we can't do that. We also can't give him Electro Leap on his weapons, which would be honestly hilarious. But aside from that, there really aren't actually any other buffs that Circle would want to give this guy. He's a Construct Warbeast, which means that he's excluded from almost all of our animi anyway, and any animi that he's not excluded from can still be cast on him by a Warbeast, because Spell Ward only stops you from casting spells. So your caster can't cast the Animus on him as a spell, but a Warbeast can cast the Animus on him as just a plain old Animus. Sorry. So, and other than that, there's really not much else we can do for him anyway. So, what we do pay a bit of a price for him having Spell Ward. We don't pay as much of a price as some people make it out to be, and we get some really huge benefits from him. First and foremost, no Spell Ward means no armor debuffs in the form of spells. This means that, like, your, let's see, Ayana, she cannot cast her harm. The Frost Shard, or whatever they're called, the Legion 3-man character unit, they can't cast their Kiss of Lilith either. Things like Curse of Shadows or Parasite, those things that tend to be the absolute bane of Gargantuans and Colossals, really just can't affect him at all. You can't Crippling Grasp him, and I can't tell you how amazing it is that he cannot be Crippling Grasped. Crippling Grasp is seriously freaking terrible for a Colossal. You put Crippling Grasp on any kind of Colossal that wants to get into melee with you, and it is just really, really neutered. It's pretty bad. Plus, it also just makes that Colossal easier to kill. So, you know, him having Spell Ward is a really, really great way to deal with that. And actually, it makes him surprisingly good at dealing with crits. Really, the only armor debuff that Crix is going to be able to throw up on him is Dark Shroud. But when you can't stack Dark Shroud with a bunch of other armor debuffs, it makes him pretty good at surviving stuff like that. Surviving attacks from Crix models. So, what else do we have to talk about? Oh yes, lastly, last major rule on his card is his Animus, which is called Druid's Wrath. This Animus is just the best. It can sometimes be hard to use, and I'll talk about why here in a little bit. But what Druid's Wrath does is that when the Woldwrath uses Druid's Wrath, basically whenever a friendly faction model targets an enemy model with a spell, while that model is within 10 inches of the Woldwrath, you follow me so far? Then they get an extra die to hit on their magic attack rolls. Extra die. It's not auto boosted, it's extra die. This means that if your Woldwrath is within 10 inches of some model and uses his Animus, and your caster goes to cast a spell at that Animus, you can boost it to make sure you can still boost it, and you can get 4 dice to hit, which is actually really fun when you're fishing for critical hit effects on a couple of the spells that we have. And it affects any friendly faction model that's casting a spell. So, say one of your Geomancers casts a spell at it, that gets the extra die. Any of your Druids cast their spells at it, they get the die. Your Black-Clad Wayfarer casts a spell at it, he gets the extra die. You know, all that kind of stuff. Extra die. So, this is actually really, really good because a lot of the crit effects that Circle has on the various models that we've got, on the various Druids, they're knockdown effects. So you put that up, you have your Druids start casting their spells, you know, your Force Bolts become hyper accurate, plus they've got a greater chance to knock down the enemy. It's so amazing. I love this Animus. It's really, really good. What makes it kind of hard to use, though, is the fact that your Woldwrath has to be within 10 inches of the enemy. Plus, a lot of times there can be some slight order of activation issues. So you want to get your Woldwrath close to the enemy. And you want to have him use his Animus. But this sometimes puts him in danger. Also, if he's doing it first, it means that he can't necessarily, you know, benefit from the spells that are being cast after him, at least not directly. What I mean by this is, if you want to, say, have your unit of Druids drag some model up very accurately and probably knock it down so that the Woldwrath can then walk up and punch the hell out of it and kill it, that's going to be a bit tricky to pull off since the Woldwrath would have to activate first, and then he obviously can't activate again to go kill the thing. And if you wanted to get around that, your caster would have to go up there and activate it and use the Animus himself, which then means your caster is within 10 inches of whatever it is you're after. It can be a bit tricky, but when you can get it to work right, Druid's Wrath is flippin' amazing. So let's talk a little bit about some of the strengths of the Woldwrath. He has just the most boxes ever. I kind of forget exactly how many boxes it is, but I think it's in the realm of like 64. It is kind of absurd. It is the most hit boxes, I believe, of any Gargantuan or Colossal in the game. He is just the tankiest brute ever. The bounce, so he can absorb a whole lot of punishment before he's really even in risk of losing any of his aspects. The downside of this, though, is that he is really hard to heal because he is, of course, a Construct Warbeast. And the wonderful thing that Circle struggles with is that our Construct Warbeasts cannot be directly healed except by Balder. We can heal them with stones, but that's about it, because druids can't heal them because they're not alive. So it can be a little tricky. Keeping your Woldwrath, you know, fully functional as the game goes on, but if you bring a way to do it, it can be really good. Now, the way I like to use the Woldwrath is he is a gigantic bully piece, and I love to save him for the late game, where he can bully the hardest. And what I mean by this is, in the beginning of the game, I like to have him walk to a spot where he can pretty reliably shoot at things. If possible, I have him stand still in that spot and aim his gun every turn and just shoot at stuff. Shoot at important things that require boosted, you know, boost hit, boost damage, get those shots on there. If I see a really good opportunity for a Druid's Wrath, or if I built the list specifically for that, I might have him move and use it. But otherwise, I try to keep him a little bit back. The rest of the army, I dedicate to killing anything that can threaten the Woldwrath too much. This is things like your Weapon Master Infantry, your really powerful deadly Warjacks like Deathjack, your really powerful deadly War Beasts like Bronzebacks or Mulg, whatever those things are that can potentially murder your Gargantuan in one round. You know, I go for those things. The Woldwrath himself is kind of contributing to the battle by plinking off infantry and gumming up their ability to move, or putting damage onto Warjacks or War Beasts, things like that, knocking out important solos. That's kind of his job for the beginning of the game. And once I've killed those things that can really threaten the Woldwrath then just walks into melee. He just trundles up there and just starts laying about him with his fists. Just bam, bam. Knocking stuff down, beating up Warjacks. POW 19 base fists, that's really damn good. Most of the time, we don't even need a power buff to Woldwrath for him to actually be able to kill something. And even if it doesn't look like he's going to be able to kill it entirely on his own, you can have him just weaken it to the point where something else can finish it off. And remember that his fists have knockdown, so whatever you're beating up is going to fall down, unless it's steady, of course. But if it's not, it's going to fall down, and even if it's not dead, it's now easy prey for the rest of your army, who can then shoot it or charge into melee with it or whatever. So, and then he just kind of continues that for the rest of the battle. He just wanders around, and armor 20 with as many boxes as he has. He is so hard to bring down. And your opponent will, if they spend too much effort trying to kill him and can't do it, that's going to lose him the game. And that's really how I love to play this guy. I think he's just amazing at it. There's some fun, janky things you can do, though. I mean, you can give him really long charges with a Gnarlhorn Animus, I believe. No, sorry, not the Gnarlhorn Animus, because that only targets living war beasts. I take it back. You can give him long charge ranges with a Blackclad Wayfarer's Hunter's Mark, and you can also help that out with a Kaya 2 Dogpile. That's the name of the spell, sorry, having a little brain fart there. Kaya 2 Dogpile, those will give him an extra 4 inches on his charge, which allows him to move, you know, that's 9-12 inches that he can charge, and then he's got 2-inch reach, makes him range 14. But, you know, a lot of times he doesn't necessarily need to charge that far to get what he's trying to get done because of the 4-inch AoE on his fists. That gives him a deceptively long threat range for setting up the rest of your army. It makes him a very strong assassination piece. If he can charge 8 inches, he has 2-inch reach, gives him a total 10-inch threat range, and then he can punch something and then drop a 4-inch AoE on top of that, which effectively gives him another 2 inches of threat range to knock down past the center of whatever it is he's after. So if you're going for a caster or something like that, if you can't reach the caster, but you can reach something that's standing near them, that is a great way to knock a caster down, and I've done that before. I've also knocked things down that were standing in front of casters and blocking line of sight that way, and then shot those casters to death. It's pretty good. So, like I said, he's really good. He's a strong support piece, and in the end of the game, he becomes a bully. Much the same as the Celestial Fulcrum, the Argus Moonhound really cranks this guy up to 11. When his gun becomes Rat 7, it really becomes really effective at sniping out those things that you don't like. And he can just really precision precision snipe those things, those important support models that your opponent doesn't want to lose. Especially since you can also remove stealth, which is probably the more important thing that the Argus Moonhound does for him, because removing stealth from things like Eris or Iona and Holt, you know, will allow you to land that shot in there and really kill them. Also, as a note, removing stealth from Iona and Holt while they're standing next to each other, then shooting one of them and electroleaping into the other and killing both is really funny. And your opponent will cry. Yes, there will be tears. But, let's see, other than that, I'm not really sure there's a whole lot to say about the Magic Monkey. He's a great piece. I think he's a little underutilized as a Gargantuan, but then the Gargantuans in general tend to be less utilized than the Colossals because of the way that the Fury mechanic works and how we're binding up so many points into models and we're only generating half the Fury. So for that reason, I find that I don't take him in lists as often as I take other things. It's kind of the same reason why I tend not to take the Celestial Fulcrum as much, because, you know, when I take the Celestial Fulcrum or when I take the Woldwrath, I'm essentially paying for 2 beasts, but I'm only getting the Fury generation of 1 beast, the Fury generation and transfer potential of 1 beast. So it is a little tricky. But anyway, I think that'll about do it. I'll wrap it up here, and I guess thanks for tuning in and watching, guys, and I'll see you all on another episode of Counterslam. Bye now.